So now we get to the worst of the diseases, the Black Plague. The big influx of the plague started in 1328 and lasted to 1351. It killed on average 7,500 people a day. It was carried by fleas, which lived on their cats and their dogs and everything else in the city. So it just kept spreading, and that's a lot of people per day. They just started digging mass graves, and everyone went there. It was really significant as far as getting people out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, because the church wasn't helping with the plague at all.
Right.
They tried, but no one was getting better. Everyone died from it. And so people started to get disillusioned with the church and how powerful it was, and started to realize we need to do something about this.
Right.
Praying to God isn't fixing these people. There's 3 different types of the plague. There's bubonic plague, which causes big lymph node swellings that turn black. That's why it's called the Black Plague. And headache and fever and delirium. Then there's pneumonic plague, which usually bubonic plague turns into if you wait long enough, which causes pneumonia. And then there's septicemic plague, which is you get septic and all your organs start to shut down. Septicemic plague is the worst one. You die within hours, so you don't get to form any signs of having the plague whatsoever. You just die. 100% mortality rate. The pneumonic plague has 100% mortality rate with coughing and sneezing and spreading the plague more. And then the bubonic plague had 50% to 70% mortality if it didn't come the other times. And then you usually died in 2 to 4 days. So there was a while for the plague to spread further. There was outbreaks of the plagues roughly every 3 years, all the way up to the 1400s. The population was declined all the way until the 19th century. It never reached its pre-plague levels of how many people lived in Europe.
Wow.
Until the 19th century. It took that long for them to recover from it. And it also caused the plague, all 3 types of the plague caused an intense desire to sleep. So people would say they're really tired, but as soon as they lie down to sleep, they die. So people would try and keep them up and be like, no, hang on, that's where that whole thing comes from. Don't close your eyes, you're going to die. They came up with the poem, the Ring Around the Rosie poem, which is all about the Black Plague.
Did not know that.
Ring Around the Rosie is because where you got bit by the flea, you get the little red rink. Pocketfuls of posies, people were smelling bad because they were dying and getting gangrene and having all these issues. So they put flowers around, trying to make them smell better at least. Ashes, Ashes was from burning all the bodies, and then we all fall down. It's just everyone's dying. So it's actually a really sad poem that we sing to kids and teach them to jump around and pretend like they're dying. They would treat the plague very symptomatically. So if you had the plague and you got a headache, they would treat you for a headache. They would give you lavender and sage rub and stuff like that, and be like, well, you still have the plague, but now your headache's better. If you had nausea, they would give you wormwood and mint, and stuff like that still helps today. You can find natural cures for nausea that's mint. Or if you were pregnant and had morning sickness, they tell you to chew on peppermint. And then they would do bloodletting. The buboes that formed from the bubonic plague were big black, hard balls that you'd get like in your armpits and your neck, wherever you have the lymph nodes. And they would bloodlet those, and it would ooze out black, nasty junk from them. And then they would treat the wounds with butter, onions, garlic, and arsenic. So some people died because they were treating their wounds for the plague. So they didn't have very good treatments for anything back then. And then towards the end of the Middle Ages is when they started actually coming up with hospitals and training physicians. They would train physicians for 10 years, so they actually put a lot of stock into, now you have to learn to be a doctor. After the plague hit, and they started to let people autopsy dead people and figure out why things went wrong and what they could do to fix it. People wanted to be doctors. So there was a doctor in 1493 that was the first one to actually make a drug to help cure people of their illnesses. He used mercury compounds at the time, which killed a lot of people too, but it did help some, miraculously. So he's like, hey, making this drug.